And this is one of the two places in the Torah that we have the Aseret HaDibros, the Ten Commandments. There are slight variations, differences between the two versions, and that's for a different time. We could talk about why there's differences. Is it the first luchos? Is it second luchos? There's different. Let me just touch on something here. I think it's really one of the most important parenting shiurim that I give. I might have spoken about this in the past. I think it's critical that it's a message that we have to go over and over. There is a medrash. Medrash is the rabbinical interpretation. The Chachamim have interpretation of psukim that have by Masorah from Sinai. And some of it is allegoric, some of it is halachic. It's known as medrash. There's different midrashim, medrash rabbah, medrash tanchuma. There is a medrash that's called a psikta. It's the name of the medrash, it's called a psikta. And the medrash deals with an interesting question that I'm sure we've heard in some variation before, is that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the luchos. If you look on top of every Aron Kodesh, you see that it's listed 1 through 5, 6 through 10. And the Medrash deals with the question is, why was it broken up in such a way? Because that's the way it was listed on carved out with the finger of God. That's the way it was listed, 1 through 5, 6 through 10. So there's different interpretations. Some say the first half focus on the relationship between us and God. The second half focus on the relationship between Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, which is fascinating that Kavod Avicha V'Simecha, which is number 5, honoring parents, is on the side that is involved between us and Hashem, which maybe we'll deal with and give an answer to that as well. But the Psikta has a really novel way of answering. It opens up, we could have a whole shir just on this Psikta itself, and Rashi in Shir HaShirim brings it down. Rashi quotes it in Shir HaShirim. The Psikta says that the way to understand the order and the way it's being presented is you're supposed to hold both sides together and read them across as one. So 1 and 6 connect, 2 and 7, 3, and you read them through, and that's why it was listed that way, to allow for the crossing over of the dibros. That's real. So if you start looking at it, it's fascinating. Let's take the first one. The first one is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher Tzeichim Mitzrayim, right? I am Hashem. The person has to believe in and have in Hashem's running of the world, both on a general level and on a hashgacha pratis, that everything we do, everything we're involved in, God is involved, as opposed to those who believe that God just created the world and then removed himself. But we believe in hashgacha pratis, that God is involved in the day-to-day running of our lives as well. And what does that connect with? Number 6. What's number 6? Lo tirtzach, do not murder. Right? So there's a fascinating insight. Rashi in Shir HaShirim says, if you would ask me what's the connection, I would say, only God has a right to take life. I am Hashem, I create everything. I'm the only one that can instruct concerning taking life. Do not murder, you cannot take life into your own hands. That's how I would have interpreted. Rashi says a whole different explanation here, which is also just opens up our eyes to in a whole different way. Rashi says as follows, that man was created in the image of God. It means God manifests within man. Man is created in the image of God. Anytime you murder someone, lo tirtzach, you have now diminished the world of God. Because now that this person no longer exists, therefore, the image of God has been removed from the world. So, Anoch Hashem Elokecha, you are taking away from the Anochi Hashem Elokecha by murdering, because there's less of that presence of God in that world. That's right. I think it's an unbelievable explanation into why there's a connection between I am the Lord your God and do not murder. The second one is that Lo Yelach Elohim Acharim Al Panai, that you're not supposed to have other gods. The relationship with us and God has to be a one that does not allow for other partners. Exclusive. It's an exclusive relationship. That's the con. And it connects to Lo Sinav, do not commit adultery. So that also we understand, and the Chazal is replete with examples of that. There is this monogamous relationship between us and God that it's akin, by serving idols is like us doing adultery. Actually, the serving of the golden calf that we did right after we got the Torah, the way Chazal put it succinctly, it's kikala shezinsa mitochu pasa. It's like a kala, like the bride, went and had a relationship from under the chuppah. Right? We're right at Har Sinai, we're getting the Torah, and then we run off and do but you see the connection is very strong between the idea of that we have to have that monotheism, which is actually what it comes from, monotheism. Avram Avinu was the one who introduced the world to monotheism, the idea of not having multiple deities and different, that's all the pagans had that. We introduced that idea that there's one God. Right? And that's the relationship, that spousal relationship as well, is that having that unit has to be a committed relationship without having other partners. You go through all of them, and there's interpretations. The one that everybody gets stuck on is number 1 and number 10, number 5 and number 10. Number 5 is Kavod es avicha v'simecha. We have a responsibility and obligation to honor our parents. And number 10 is lo sachmod beis re'echa. A person cannot covet. Right? A person should not desire or covet. In the Parsha Yitro, it doesn't say the word tachmod. It says lo titaveh. It's a certain the desire, similar idea. Lo sachmod eishes re'echa. A person is not allowed to covet or desire your friend's wife. We've spoken up in the past why it already says don't do adultery. Why does it have to repeat? All right, we've spoken about that. And ava'avdo, and his servant, amaso, his maidservant, shoro, chamoro, his possessions, asher l're'echa. So what's the connection between honoring parents and not coveting what your neighbor has? So the way I usually introduce this as a parenting class it's unbelievable, thank God I got to know my grandparents, but even my parents, but you see people have seen, you see in the older generation, the difference in the level of kibud av va'em that the earlier generation had for their parents, and you hold it up to ourselves and our children, and you see, what happened? What happened? I mean, it's like, where did things go wrong? I mean, before iPhones, even before iPhones, but you're right, that doesn't hurt. But I remember my grandfather, when he spoke about his father, such reverence. It was like I still remember people standing up when their parent came into the room. Like, what's happened? Where is this? So to get a clearer understanding, I think this is the source. This is where we need to look to understand what is it that we're doing wrong. I'm not saying I'm going to come up with a solution to how to change it yet. But first let's understand where the problem is. When we can understand what the problem is, then you can identify what it is, and then you can start attacking it. But we first have to understand what the issue is. So we're trying to find out what's the connection between number 5 and number 10, between honoring parents and coveting. What is the connection there? How is one insight into the other one? We understand number one and number 6, number 2 and number 7. We understand the other ones. How does 5 and 10 connect? And we're trying to get just the basic, like, why has this been Yerida, this lowering of standards when it comes to honoring parents? One of the greatest of the Sephardic, the Spanish commentaries, is known as the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that the Rambam instructs his son. He says, all the commentaries on the Torah I forget about. The only commentary you have to read is mine, which we don't have anymore, the Parsha of the Rambam on the Torah, and the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra he's a brilliant philosopher, and his ideas are very controversial. But it's like a standard in learning Chumash today. You learn the Ibn Ezra. So Ibn Ezra asks the following question. And he takes on questions that, like, most of us are afraid to even ask. But the Ibn Ezra asks the following question. He says, I don't understand. Not me. He says, the world asks the question. He says, Rabbi, many people ask the following question. How can HaKadosh Baruch Hu have a commandment, one of the basic tenets? This is number 10 on the Aseret Dibros, means each one of these 10 beside Yagon shows represents a portion of mitzvahs in the Torah. So the 10 really are all 613. So these are like the prototypes that have built in others too. But what is number 10? Do not covet. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet his ox. Do not covet his donkey. Do not covet his house. Do not covet. So he says, even though it says many people ask the question, he says it seems to be that this commandment is against human nature. Why? Because human nature is, anytime someone sees something he likes, the nature he wants. So how can there be a commandment to do something? God, you programmed us with a certain nature, and now you're commanding us to do something. There's the antithesis of what human beings are. Everyone sees things they want, they like. They like it, they want it. How can there be such a commandment? How can you command an emotion, if you want to put it in other words?
Commercials.
Right? How can you command that? How can you restrict the natural order? I mean, we live in a society, if it feels good and you like it, it's good. Right? So how could there be this commandment? People see things they want, they like. How can you command a person not to? That's the Ibn Ezra's. He says people ask it. And then he goes and tears apart the question. He says that the fundamental premise of the question is incorrect. He gives 3 examples to prove his thesis, what he's trying to bring. So, he gives one example, and he says, why is it that you see a bird flying, you don't automatically say, I wish I could fly and have this tremendous desire, I want to be able to fly. Why don't most normal human beings have that feeling? Why is it? Because you can't fly. If you can't fly, you don't desire or covet something that you can't have. You can't be. He says, he gives an example which is called of the Ish Kafri, the person who lives he lived in a time when there was a caste system, right? When there was the monarchy, and then there was the people underneath them, and the lowest level was the person is the Ish Kafri, the person, the village person. There were certain levels of where you were in status. Right? We don't really identify with that. I mean, the whole concept of the United States was to break away from that concept. But coming from their position, his example works in those places where you have that hierarchy. He says, if the daughter of the king, beautiful daughter of the king, is driving by in her gold carriage, And you got this lowly pauper, this village fellow, who sees her going by. He says he doesn't have desire for her. You know why he doesn't have desire for her?
It's not in his reach.
It's not within his reach. Something that is not in the reach of a person, you cannot desire. He gives a third example. Again, in healthy families. He says, no matter how beautiful the mother is, right? I guess Freud might not agree with this completely, but no matter how, he says, a child will not desire physically the mother. Because from a young age, it's made clear what the parameters are, what the boundaries are. And therefore, a person who understands clearly what these boundaries are cannot have that desire, because he knows it's not within his reach. It's not within his capacity to be able to have that. So he's just basically taken Western civilization and turned it on its head. Because we come from the perspective that, there's emotions and there's feelings and there's the way we love and you can't fight those things. What he's saying basically is, if there is clear knowledge about something, that where the boundaries are, you cannot have the emotions, because it's the brain that controls the emotion. It's not the emotion that controls the brain. And therefore, and this is the point he makes, which is unbelievable. You have to see this Ibn Ezra inside. You have a chance, you understand the Hebrew. You look inside, it's Parsha Yitro lo Sachmon. The Ibn Ezra basically says like this, and this, I guess, this is the way I heard the explanation from Rosh Shiva, just a little more, the terminologies. He says there's two ways to view the world. There's what's known as an egocentric world, or there's a theocentric world. Egocentric world is man sees himself as the center of the universe, and everything that's around him is there to serve him. Or there's the theocentric world. What's the theocentric world? Is who's in the middle?
Hashem.
Hashem is in the middle. And everything that's around him, is on the periphery, is there to serve God. So this is the point he makes, an unbelievable point. He says, you know why people desire and covet? They only desire and covet because they believe they can have it. But if people believed, if their emunah was there and they believed that God runs the world and God gives everybody what they should have, then I would not be able to look at my neighbor's wife and covet her. Because I know God gave my neighbor his wife, that's not for me. So he says that the basic flaw in the question is that the premise of it is you desire it because you think you can have it. But if you know that you cannot have it because it doesn't belong to you, and you believe it doesn't belong to you, and you don't feel it should come to you, then you cannot desire it. I heard one of my Rebbeim once gave an example how, it's hard for us, look at something practical. You're standing at a stoplight, or you're standing at a red light, maybe a red light, and somebody comes and starts honking behind you. What's our natural feeling immediately when somebody, you can't drive because there's a red light, and someone's honking. So what do you feel at that moment?
Anxiety.
What's that?
Anxiety.
And more than that, you have, where there's, used to be California was the number one state for, what do they call those? Car raging. Car rage. People get out and shoot the guy behind them. You feel like you want to just get up and beat this guy up, because how can he be honking at you? You turn around and you see it's a friend of yours. Right? So you've gone from the immediate feeling of, if I had a gun, I would shoot him, to you realize now he's honking because he's just trying to say hello. How do you switch on a dime? Because it's the mind that controls the emotion. The mind is going to... So the premise that it's the emotion that's controlling the mind, that's a false premise. But the mind, in order for not to be affected, it has to be something that you know that this cannot be. I cannot fly. I don't desire wings. I know that. I understand that. God runs the world. My neighbor's wife is his wife, not mine. If I know that and I believe that, but you know the reason we desire? Because in our minds, why should he have her? I should have her. Why should he have that car? It should be my car. Why should he have that house? It should be my house. How could you feel that way? You can only feel the way because you don't believe that God gave it to him. If you believe God gave it, then you will not be able to desire. That is the premise that the Ibn Ezra says.
But there is gava. Gava? Limited gava?
Well, it's arrogance. There's arrogance. Yes, there is arrogance, but it's more than that. It's a level of lack of belief. You know, but it's tied together. Arrogance is also, the Gemara says that being arrogant is a form of avodah zarah. What does it mean? Because you don't believe in God, you believe in yourself. It's that you believe that you're running everything. So let's take this a step further, because it's the question really is on some level true. We consider ourselves, adults, and we understand intellectually, and we read the Ibn Ezra, and we understand God runs the world, and therefore it's something we need to work on, and our emunah and our belief in Him running the world will counteract, let's say, our level of desire. But that's not how we're born. Right? Ever take a little kid into a candy store? Right? Children are egocentric by nature. We're born egocentric. We're born to want everything. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. So how do you change that? You're telling me, okay, you're not supposed to, this is a theocentric world. God is in the center. Go tell a 5-year-old. He's having a tantrum, right, in the toy store. This is this is a theocentric world. Start having that conversation. How do you get that message across to our children? Because by definition, our children are egocentric. We're born with seeing only ourselves, and everything is from the perspective of ourselves. That's how we're born. So how do we change that? So really, there's only one way to change that. And that is through parenting. Kibbud Av V'Em. The Torah's solution to our children being born egocentric is Kibbud Av V'Em. You look in the Gemara in Kedushin, it talks about what is Kibbud Av V'Em. Child is supposed to bring the parents to eat, bring them to drink. It's service. The child is supposed to literally serve the parent. That's how we're supposed to raise our children. Children are supposed to understand. You have a family unit. You know who's in the center of the family unit? The parent. The children are on the peripheral. Children are there to serve the parent. Why is it set up that way? Because that's the only way the children will understand the boundaries. That's the only way they'll understand and remove that focus of it's not all about me. It's about our parents. We have to serve our parents. The problem that's happened, and this is the difference in generations, it might have been like that 2-3 generations ago. Right? The parent was the center, and the children were the periphery. What we've done today is we've put our children in the center, and we're there to serve them. So not only are you not removing the egocentricity from your child, you're fueling it. You're fueling it. We are making our children even more egocentric. Because the whole idea, they see themselves the center of the universe. What have we done? We put them on a pedestal. And they continue. And now it's impossible to remove that from the children. And what's the bigger problem? The bigger problem is that you can't teach that God is the center of the universe until you start teaching the parent is the center of the universe. That transition to understanding that God exists and runs everything only starts when the child gets out of that mode. We live in that. That's the selfie generation. The child has to get out of that selfie mindset. The way to get out of it is the parent. So creating the kibbud av ha'em parameters that the parent is the center, the unit of the family, and not the child, has the natural transition to God being in the center. But if you can't get to the point where the parent is in the center, you're not going to make that transition. More than ever, why do we have problems? Kids don't appreciate davening. They don't like davening. They don't have the relationship with God. You know why they don't have the right relationship with God? Because they don't have the right relationship with their parents. That's the reason they don't have the right. It's not the Rebbe or they have that sense of appreciating what God is can only come when they don't see themselves as the center. Because by nature, that is how they feel. That's how they've been created. Kibbud av ha'em is the mitzvah that creates that bridge. The Gemara says that honor of Hashem is equated, it's hukash, to kibbud av ha'em. What does that mean? Because without coming to the honor of kibbud av ha'em, you're not going to come to the kibbud Hashem. You're not going to come to the honoring of Hashem. You don't come through that honor. It's to make that jump. It's almost impossible. And people have made it. Unfortunately, they have dysfunctional family situations. There are people that have been able to be reflective and create it on its own, but it's very hard. That's the mitzvah. And that's the answer, either way. Number 5 is connected to number 10. Number 10 is don't desire, don't covet, meaning we can't be egocentric. We can't think everything is mine. The only way we said, Ibn Ezra says you can think everything is yours is because you don't believe God is the center. You think you're the center. So the question is, so how do you change that? Number 5. Kibbud av ha'em is the way to fight number 10. If you do number 5 right, then you're not going to have a problem with number 10. If you don't do number 5, that's when you're going to have the problem with number 10. That is the connection. The building that sense of parameters and understanding. And even from, the problem is we live in a world of excess. Kids have everything. That's creating that. So therefore, how many of us, when people were growing up on the farm, there were chores, right? You had to milk the cow, and you had to go ahead and then feed the goat, there was this concept of having to contribute and be part of what needs to be done for our existence. That's where you created that service of serving, We have to get back to that. My wife is here. There's lists on the fridge. Who's responsible for clearing the table? Who's responsible for putting up the Shabbos thing? Even though you don't need it, you have maids. You need to have it. You have to create that, and it's harder to. You don't start with a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old kid and say, you know what? You need to start making your bed and cleaning the table. You're going to have a tough battle on your hand. But you start with him when he's 4 or 5 years old. Then at 15, it's going to work. So listen, baby steps. But the idea really is the sense that we have to really position ourselves and reposition ourselves as the authority in the family. And this goes across the board. I mean, even here, where are you sending your kid to school next year? Well, let's see where he wants to go. Let's see where he wants to go. Since when do you let a 13-year-old child make a decision that's going to impact on him for the rest of his life? Parents.
They seem to think they can make that decision.
Well, we've empowered them to do so. We empower them to do so. So it's the idea of recreating that family unit with the parent being the decision makers. We live in California. There's how many families run around that they're on first name basis with their parents? Can you think about that? I mean, tell your grandfather, that your kid's going to be calling you by his first name. He wouldn't be able to get the first syllable out before he'd lose his teeth. I mean, it's like, it's unheard of. I think we just have to parent, We have to find, they have to like us, they're friendly, we're looking for acceptance. We're looking for acceptance. It'll happen, honestly. The teachers that are successful here are not the ones that want them to be their friends. Are the ones that saying, I'm the teacher, I'm the authority, and you're in my class, I'm here to teach you. The ones that are trying to find acceptance are the ones that don't end up being respected. The ones that end up getting respected are the ones that understand that they're the authority. Same thing in the family. So we have our work cut out for ourselves. Again, it's not something, but that is one of the 10 commandments. Honoring parents, that's how you come to honor Hashem. You want your kid to appreciate davening. You want your kid to appreciate what life has to offer. You want your kid to be able to show gratitude. We have to stop this selfie idea that it's all about me. That's the whole millennial thing. It's like all about us. It's all about how, my feelings and how I feel. It's not about you. There's a big world. There's a big picture. You're part of that. How do you fit in? Well, find out what you have to contribute, then you'll know what you fit in. Don't find out what everyone has to do for you. What to work on.
If it stems from how your parents raised you, that if your parents teach you that you're not the center of the universe, then what does an adult who was raised thinking that they're the center of the universe do? How do they change that for themselves if they don't have that parenting?
Understanding that is my problem is the first way to be able to start dealing with it. Understanding that was my problem, and then if I have to start, and then hopefully I give over the correct message for my children. As I said,
how do you change it within yourself as an adult when you don't have that opportunity to start out as a child?
So adult, I think it has to come with a stronger belief in Hashem. That's where you have to start with creating that the centrality of God, and me being not being on the periphery, not on the center. I mean, that's you just don't have the boost of having it been done from young, but that's where it has to come from. I mean, that's how to remove the egocentric. Listen.